Within the span of 24 hours, Celestial randomly showed up on Kickstarter, and it's now canceled. What the heck happened? Alright, if you don't know what Celestial is, let me explain. First of all, it's a game I've put on my top I'm looking forward to list for each year since 2019, I believe, was the first year it showed up. No joke, it's been 3-4 years since I've known about this game, and I've been excited about this game. It's kind of ridiculous that after all of that waiting, it just randomly shows up. No fanfare, no advertising, no prototypes, no nothing that we can kind of see. It was just thrown up there. They don't post most of their images. It's a mess of a campaign, and then they cancel it. This is by Dimension Games. If you don't know who they are, they did Deep Madness and Dawn of Madness and Twisted Fables. And this is just a wild ride. Now, I'm going to be covering this in a very peculiar, a very specific way. I'm going to be going over the campaign to show you what it is. We're just going to be going over, this is what they put up there. I'll point out some of the oddities and point out some of the things that weren't there within the first, 12 hours or so that kind of popped up towards the end there. But again, this was not a long campaign to begin with. I'll even show you an update they put on Dawn of Madness. I'll go through just a few comments, literally only 2. So we're going to be kind of covering over that. We'll be going over their FAQ because they added some interesting things there. They even have a Make Games Not Campaigns comment, which is kind of interesting. So we'll go over that, and then we'll end with the final closure update. So that's kind of the order of things here. And suffice it to say, pretty interesting stuff. So if you didn't know, this was literally announced, it shows 3 days ago now, right? Because it's 9/28, but literally this was oh, hey, it's randomly coming up. This is all we had. There's 9 likes on this. There's 1 share. This just came out of the blue. And then we got an any update on this one on September 20th. And then finally, again, just 3 days ago, we're launching this on Wednesday, in which case I responded with, man, some warning and notification would have been nice as somebody who covers this and has been adamant about this for a long time now. And then Craig responds with, well, there was some warning a whole day. So yeah, it's kind of ridiculous how they just threw this up there willy-nilly. It is wild that they did this. So what does it look like? So obviously it's canceled now. You can see it raised about $92,338. They had a $300,000 goal from 379 backers. You can see that I did actually pledge here. I was at the $350 one, but we'll go over those pledges in a moment. The one thing I think is nice to point out here before we even move on from that is the $300,000 goal. It was nice to see them being more realistic and not actually lying about the funding goal and putting it at 20,000 so that they would have already been funded and unlocking stretch goals, hoping behind the scenes that it reaches 300,000 or more. Instead, they're 300,000. That's the goal. That's what we're putting out. I very much appreciate that. I try to call out good behavior when I see it as well, and that is definitely good behavior. There's some not so good behavior as well, but that is seriously something I want to see more of, because so often when we see those fake goals, we just are left wondering what the actual number is. In fact, even with the 300,000, we are left kind of wondering, is that actually it? I don't know, because we're burned so often as consumers on this crowdfunding space for board games. It's kind of rough. But as you can see, obviously, they weren't blowing through that 300,000 day one. And a lot of that, I think, is probably because not a lot of people knew about it. They didn't advertise it very well. Okay. So you can see right here that they're offering the Hidden Void Episode 1 and the Dark Origin Episode 2, and they're hoping to unlock the Entombed Aeon in Episode 3 as a stretch goal. Now, that's a big stretch goal, offering essentially an extra third of what you already have. That's pretty massive of a stretch goal. Now, would they get all that? Who knows where that is. They had an interesting delivery, too. It says you can expect to deliver all miniatures in this campaign by October 2024 and all game components by October 2025. In other words, you would get the minis a year earlier. There is an explanation for this, and it's not just so that you can paint your minis before. There is a legit explanation. We'll get to that. But right now, let's just look through the campaign. So as I say, that was not explained very well. Why are you doing that? I think it's kind of nice if you're going to do that. And I will say also that a 2-year delivery campaign, I appreciate more than saying a year and then delaying like everybody else does. When you see the arbitrary random year, and then you realize that unless they're ready to start printing soon, that it takes 2 to 3 months to manufacture at a massive scale, and then you actually spend another 2 to 3 months getting to the hubs, and then another 3 to 4 months before final deliveries in all countries are done. So it takes like 2/3 of a year just to actually fully deliver a game. Now, it can get a little bit quicker in some ways than others. It depends on the type of game, how many backers there are, all sorts of stuff like that. But for a big campaign game that, you know, you're expecting a lot of different people to order different bits and expansions and all that, and to manufacture all that stuff and align it all together, and there's backers from all over the world, it can take months and months and months. Even from production, it takes a while. So, like, to see that, hey, we'll be 2 years out on the game, actually kind of appreciate. I again, and one of those nice things. Now, I'm going to start getting to the not nice things, but the first two, right? Good funding goal, actually realistic delivery of 2 years. Like, at least you're not lying to me. You get the sticker shock, right? But I appreciate it. I'd rather you be upfront about it than say otherwise. There's actually a twist to that, but again, we'll get to that in a moment, but it's not what you think. Okay, so why back now? Obviously, you have a huge MSRP. I do want to explain this real quick because I saw some people questioning this. If this is Kickstarter exclusive, why is there an MSRP? Well, the manufacturer sale price that they're kind of like recommending is just that, a recommended price for retail. And you can price it out and assume that. In fact, you should, as part of your figuring out if you're going to go to retail or not. That's part of the deal, is what would this realistically sell as? How often would it sell at that? What would its cost be if we practically did this? As a business, you should be able to create an MSRP for anything you're selling. That's part of the process of, you know, figuring that out and deciding if it went to retail, that's what we'd suggest you sell it at, because we'd sell it to you at this amount, and we could do that based off all these numbers and stuff like that. So it's very easy to make an MSRP, and in fact, you should have an MSRP. That doesn't necessarily mean you want to advertise it that way, but that's why you'll see that even on things that aren't planned at retail, if that makes sense. So anyway, Epic Pledge 350, gameplay all-in 525. There's another secret all-in. Again, we'll get to that too. It's kind of wild. And obviously save a whole bunch of money, right? You get a complimentary gift of Nua. That's my favorite miniature there. She has kind of a scared, worried face, which is really, really cool. When I painted her, I actually put her like back against the wall because she's on the run, and there's a lot of political stuff. The story's really cool. Anyway, and the DNA that she has, also very cool. Anyway, then it shows the hips miniatures and stuff like that, and be a part of the journey, whatever. So, Hidden Void, $175 for the kind of episode 1 that you get, the Hidden Void, plus the Nua Unipack. So, Dark Origin, also $175. The Epic, which is both of them, plus this, because you only get the stretch goal if you get the other two, which is interesting because I don't know if you actually need both the other ones to play it or not, because my understanding is that you're all kind of standalone faction kind of things a little bit, but maybe not. Either way, $350 for that. So in other words, for the cost of both, you get that as well. So they're really pushing the $350 Epic one. Now, before I go any further, the reason the prices are the way they are is because they are in Hips miniatures thing, just like the Gamers chest, right? I think at the end, you guys let me know, what did the Gamers chest end up selling for? Was it $400? I paid $250 for that box. And I got it, I think, after 1 or 2 increases, because it was a free stretch goal, and then I think it was like $150, and then maybe $200, $250, something like that. It was somewhere around there. Either way, I paid $250 for that. Hips miniatures, by the way, the Hips plastic is quite expensive. It's about 4 times as expensive as a normal board game miniature. And a lot of that price isn't even in the sculpt, but is actually in the raw cost of the plastic itself. So the only way you can kind of get really, really cheap Hips typically is either a fairly low quality Hips. You can get some of that in like Shadows of Brimstone stuff. Not that Shadows of Brimstone's bad. It's just, it's very easy molds to make. And they do large bulk, and even then it's kind of pricier. Archon Studio does Hips miniature as well. They manufacture it themselves, so they can they cut out the middleman there, right? So they can lower prices that way as well. But Hips plastic, it's just more expensive. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And obviously, these are bigger miniatures. You'll get into that as well. Gameplay all in 525, and you're going to see 2 unit expansions here. Notice it's gameplay. They have terrain at the end as well, so it's a big thing. You're going to see my video here showing off the miniatures. This was not here originally. Originally, they had nobody showing off the final miniatures. And that's kind of interesting because you're going to see all of a whole bunch of like renders and stuff, but they have almost all of these miniatures already like in Hips plastic, final production quality. This is what you'll get. So it's interesting that they're still using the renders when you don't have to do that. Okay, so I'm not going to scroll through all of these, but this is kind of about what you get. I think in the other pack you get 52. Here it's 51 Hips miniatures. I think it's about 20 unique sculpts, and then you get some repeats. 400 plus cards, 500 plus tokens and dials, 10 game boards, 3 battlefields, and 5 scenarios each with 3 game modes. And you'll see that like this guy right here is 130 millimeters, right? So 130 millimeter Hips miniature. Again, that could cost quite a bit. A kind of mid-range Titan in Games Workshop, for instance, will be about $160. And the larger ones, $190 to like $210 here in America for that hips model. Typically they have some options, whereas this doesn't, though this has sculpted bases, whereas typically those don't. So it kind of ebbs and flows. But either way, getting that in a $175 box with a whole bunch of others, not actually too bad for what you typically buy. Warhammer is obviously the most popular hips miniature stuff. You see, even these guys are like about 75. Even these little pedestals, 46. So they're edging towards 50 there at that point. They're actually quite large. And you can see some of the game components here. You get cards and stuff like that. You get a whole bunch of these like smaller units. This pack has a lot of these smaller guys. The other one has other units that aren't quite as small that you get a whole bunch of. But as you can see, you get a ton of stuff. There's a lot there that you're going to be getting. This was the only video they had at all. So they sent it to On Tabletop. They have a prototype apparently that they sent to them. They unboxed the prototype. They even have another video that they didn't post here where they actually play the prototype a little bit. So that's what you had there. Here's the other one. Again, I'm going to kind of skip through all this. But as you can see, a ton of minis that they're showing. Just minis. This guy, he's massive, 150 millimeters tall and very wide as well. He's almost like a square when it comes to how wide he is versus how tall he is. So there's a lot there, obviously. They're selling a lot. This is a big campaign. Okay, so here finally, they're starting to actually show close up to the renders, and they actually show, look at that, real hips plastic. So you know that, hey, they're actually real, which is kind of nice. They even show you kind of building and gluing and stuff like that, which again, great to do. There's some of the stretch goal stuff they're going to do. We're going to go ahead and skip on to the add-ons. Add-ons were pretty pricey too, about $125 for 11 miniatures. So the add-ons expansions, definitely, this is one of my favorite minis, by the way. It's a fantastic mini. Definitely on the pricier side. Most expansions aren't quite as good as the core deal, and I think the profit margin on most expansions help pay for the cheaper core boxes. When you look at a campaign and pricing, this is another one of my favorite guys. You got to price it as a whole. In other words, how much you're going to make total, not just this has to make this much, this has to make this much, this to make this much. Is typically how you want to do it, which is kind of the smart way to do it. Anyway, then they also have some like terrain and scenery and stuff like that. Just some crazy stuff. I've shown a lot of these to you guys before, but again, a ton of stuff. If we go down to shipping here, you're going to see that they actually mention an all-in. So this is part of that sloppiness, right? Where they don't show the all-in. In fact, they only tease it like, oh, I can't confirm or deny the all-in was a comment that Byron had at one point, when obviously there is an all-in. You can even see how much it weighs, 53 pounds versus 30 pounds for the gameplay all-in. And so they just didn't almost realize what's on their campaign page. It's crazy. It's crazy. Then they had the world sitting here, and in the middle of this, they pasted in, in the middle of this, they pasted in an About Us, and then it goes back to this, which is kind of funny. And they show the Twisted Fables, they show the Dawn of Madness, they show the Deep Madness. Okay, so that's what they had, right? That's what was available. When they launched, you couldn't add any add-ons. That was added afterwards as well. So if you wanted to add that terrain, the scenery bundles and stuff like that, which by the way, all the scenery together, another $650. So yeah, very, very pricey stuff there, for sure. And they didn't really tell you how that's used in the game either. So you don't even really get a good sense of it. It's just pictures of minis. So this is just a bad campaign. They have miniatures that are professionally painted. They had professional, like way very good painted minis. They had a competition for it at one point. They've been used in competitions because it's on their resins for a while and their hips. And it's just like crazy that they didn't include any painted miniatures at all. Even Come On puts painted miniatures on there. Like, oh, why just the renders and that's it? It's just not a well done campaign. It wasn't advertised. It just got sprung up on everybody. It's a mess. It's a mess. So let's go ahead to some comments. This is actually the Dawn of Madness update. Byron posted this about halfway through the series, right? So he went on here because people were upset. He said, for those expecting Celestial's campaign to greatly impact this one, we set the delivery date for 2 years out of Celestial's gameplay components for a reason, and it's because Celestial will be and it's not because Celestial will be an overly complex game to create. It's so we have plenty of time to finish up Wave 2 of Dawn of Madness. So the idea of this is we're going to give you the minis because they're almost all done anyway, but we're not going to deliver this game, and this is what they said, until they deliver Dawn of Madness. You will get Dawn of Madness before you get Celestial, which again, not communicated very well, not communicated up front either. Definitely didn't have time to build up to this or anything like this. They just turned it on and then people freaked out because it hadn't gone Dawn of Madness. And so then they had to start doing, some fire control here. So that was that kind of update there was kind of interesting. If we go here to the comments, we're going to read just one for now. We'll read another one in a bit. But this kind of summarizes it, I think, really well. So right here, it says, something I don't understand. 6 years of developing a game, paying and showing up at conventions, creating a prototype, thousands of hours of designing graphics, 3D game mechanics, a lot of money invested. Notice this was 19 hours ago, and this was still before they canceled it. Like, this is recent. And no advertising, no Celestial and BGG, no YouTubers, no one hears about it. Do so much, and at the end, before the finish line, shoot yourself in the knee. Normally it's the foot, but this part is probably the knee and the foot. Went through the knee and into the foot. A failure of planning. It's a great shame to wait so long to admire, to look forward to the upcoming multi-million-dollar campaign to get the game released. Now it looks like patching a budget hole for the Dawn of Madness project. And I think that is such a great example of what went wrong here. Not only had you waited so long that it was unfortunate just to see it like shot out there like that, just shotgunned onto the internet live, here you go, in such a poor form when you've had all this time. Very unfortunate. It's just a sad way to have the story progress when it comes to this game. Because again, so many people have been hyped for this for so long. But the last part, super important. It makes it look like it's a budget hole is what it looks like. That's what the worry is there, right? So did they have a response to that? Actually, they did end up adding some FAQs, and the FAQs are a hoot. So if we go here to your Dawn of Madness campaign saw pretty significant delays. Should I expect the same from this one? And then they go into why this isn't the case. First of all, Dawn of Madness had sweeping changes during the campaign. So this is true. When they sent me the prototype, it was not even fully playable. It was a mess. And it had a big issue. One of the issues was that only one person at the table even cared about what's going on because they were like the main character and everybody else just did not matter. They couldn't do anything except help the other person do stuff. It was just launched too early. It was one of those games, one of those campaigns, just like a lot of these other ones, where it was put on Kickstarter far too soon. One of the benefits of that in the long run, I think, is because it got such critical feedback. I know I was pretty heavy on it when it comes to the criticism, is that they redid it and are making it better. But obviously that means now they have to start the multi-year process of designing a game after launching the campaign. And that's what a lot of these have an issue with, right? And so that's kind of what happened there. I think, again, long run, it just means everybody gets a better game. A Trudvang Legends is another great example, right? Where they shot it on, shot it onto the Kickstarter. It wasn't that great. They went back to the drawing board and essentially you now have to remake the whole game. And so that's kind of what they had to do. Same thing with Dawn of Madness. It's very similar. Now, it says here that most of their molds have been made. So that's very true. I have most of these miniatures, like far over half of these starter boxes. I have like final production plastic models. Like they have quite a bit of work on this. The important part here is that Celestial is also a very different type of game than Dawn of Madness. It is simpler to create. This is something I only learned about through coverage and through talking to developers. I never really thought about this. But if you take something like, let's take Oathsworn, for example, or, Madara, or any of these other, and Trespass Odyssey, any of these big games like this, these games, not only do they have like hundreds of thousands of words and story to do, branching paths and all this kind of stuff, the amount of art that you even have to approve is massive. All these items and equipment, they all have different art, and you got to balance them all and make sure it's a very complex thing. Now compare that to something like, let's say, let's do Blood Rage. Blood Rage has a fixed board. It has these certain clans. And that's it. Even the cards when you're drafting them are really just words. It's not like a whole lot of equipment. You have to do a whole lot of story or scenarios or campaign progression or all that kind of stuff. Making a game like Blood Rage is way cheaper than making a game like Dawn of Madness, like any of these other big RPG games that we look at. So not all games are created equal when it comes to how expensive they are. So when you see a success on there, you like a funding goal, and let's say they all equal, $800,000. Well, the Blood Rage just made a lot more money. Come on, buddy. Blood Rage made a lot more money in that case, right? Because it's just a cheaper game to make. There's just not as much there. So same kind of thing here. As a skirmish game, once you have the molds and the minis and stuff like that, that's kind of the biggest part there. But otherwise, you just kind of fight on the map, right? So it's a lot cheaper to make something like that than to make something like Dawn of Madness. It's something I had never really thought about as a consumer, and I only found out about that once talking to creators. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Wanted to share that with you guys. This last one, though, I love it. Are you creating campaigns, not games? Love it. Love it. Yeah, let's address that. We delayed Celestial years past when we initially planned to launch. Very true. Very true. Like I said, I was expecting it to launch every year now for years. And so we could focus on Dawn of Madness. We didn't launch the campaign until Dawn of Madness and the most recent Deep Madness reprint were in production. They started pre-production. Just to clarify that a little bit. And even then on like the Dawn of Madness, Wave 1 started in pre-production. So it's very much just barely, right? I mean, they did, and factories don't click print until they're paid. They're not stupid. So like, obviously things are going well there. And in fact, it says this is our first big campaign since Dawn of Madness was funded in December of 2019. So there are Twisted Fables, there are Deep Madness reprints, or just mostly reprints plus like a few extra new things. So very minor things. That's why nobody really complained about that. You know, when they did 2 Twisted Fables, people weren't so much up in arms because it's just this quick little thing. It's obviously cheaper and it helps them kind of keep going on, which is good. But Celestial is a bigger thing, so obviously we're a little bit more sensitive about that. And there had been more and more delays ever since, so it just gets worse and worse for the Dawn of Madness backers. All right, so finally, let's go to the update. Here is the actual, hey, we canceled, and here's why, right? And we're gonna answer a few questions here. So Byron says, we wanted to, first of all, this first few, just note how different this is than like a Mythic Games update, okay? We wanted to give you a heartfelt thank you for your support. Over the past dozen plus hours, you have been an absolutely incredible and have shown your support for this fledgling campaign. We appreciate you more than you could possibly know and are so grateful to you. Okay? However, after assessing the first day, we've made a decision, and that decision is we made a mistake. Very true and very obvious, I think, to everybody outside of it. I do think that sometimes you kind of get stuck on something, and then it's just assumed that thing's there, and if nobody's there to like jump in and say, hey, this isn't like reality anymore, it can be kind of hard. As a kind of example I personally have experienced, when I had my old work, we were busy launching these physical products, right? And I worked on the conformance testing of the firmware. I know that sounds really boring. It was really boring. However, it paid fairly well. But the point is that we made these physical products and sold them to consumers. But those products in their physical form are expensive, like $30,000, right? Or more. So they were very expensive products, and we didn't just want to like go test on them. We had some testing on them, but for the most part, you tested against these simulators. Then the simulator would be a virtual thing. And then we even had emulators, which was a computer that thought it was a $30,000 device. And so we would go against the simulator, and we ended up in a position to where at some point I literally stopped the meeting we were in and be like, guys, we don't sell simulators. Because we were talking about simulators, because that's what we use all the time when we're developing. And we were talking about things that only a simulator could do, but the actual physical thing, because it's physical, you couldn't. And we were talking about fixing things for the simulator and doing stuff like that when that's not what that's not the point. That's not what you sell. So you can get into this kind of weird thing when you're in the trenches and you're working on things to where like you get stuck on that, and that's just assumed and you don't question it. You just keep going. And I think part of it is that. I'm sure there's more, but either way, I can understand that because I've been there. Celestial was initially planned to launch after the first wave delivered of our project Dawn of Madness, which a few months ago was estimated to be August. So they were definitely wrong in their estimation. However, due to some setbacks into the character story, we already know about all that. I want to stress, either way, it didn't happen, right? I want to stress that these were not delays caused by lack of funds. So again, that was something that was a lot of questions because I cover all these campaigns, right? That like suck at this and like they just need more money. And so they're just, doing a Ponzi scheme, robbing Peter, pay Paul kind of thing, right? And so that was everybody's concern. Why would you just shotgun this the moment you talk about production of Dawn of Madness? What's going on here? Do you need money for the Dawn of Madness reprint? Is that it? So you don't have to ask for shipping? You're hoping this is a success? That was everybody's worry. And that's a legitimate worry. We've been burned so many times that it just, I mean, yeah, that's scary. So it wasn't until they canceled that they really reassured this, hey, no, we're fine. We can cancel this. Like, it's no big deal. We just kind of jumped the gun a little bit. It's kind of what they're saying here. And then they talk about how the most expensive part of the process is actually producing the miniatures, in which case that has been done for a long time, blah, blah, blah. It says here, we didn't want to miss another year. Right? So they're stuck on, wow, we don't want to miss 2023. We were set on this. So seeing our window slipping away, we panicked and made the hasty decision to launch Celestial in September without the proper ramp up, notice, or more importantly, consideration for the feelings of our backers and our other campaigns. We sincerely apologize for this. Very, very much the case. Yeah, it was very obvious that this just came as a snap decision. A huge snap decision of, okay, let's go. In fact, it was going to be Tuesday and then they postponed to Wednesday, so they must have not had something ready. If you go to the campaign page again, I didn't quite mention this, but they have like some like how to plays and stuff like that, like in the gameplay. If you scroll down here, you're going to see like coming soon. Like, okay, so you, how to play an epic mode and cooperative solo and competitive. They didn't even have those videos ready. Why would you not wait for those to be ready? Just wait. If you don't have to launch, don't. So it almost, again, it seemed like they just did it all of a sudden, right? This is probably the only time you see a painted miniature. It's these two images even in this whole campaign. So yeah, it was just a mess when it comes to that. So no proper ramp up, no notice, no nothing. They just shot it on there. And one of the big things they didn't think about is how that will look to people who have been waiting for years for Dawn of Madness. And again, I cannot stress how important that is, that creators realize that their livelihoods are because those people gave you money and are still waiting for a game that you never gave them. That's a huge, like, thank you. Like, you are so important to me. I couldn't live my life right now if it wasn't for your insane amount of trust and insane amount of patience, even if you're begrudgingly doing it, even if you're complaining a little bit about doing it. Kind of understandable. All that to say, we have decided to cancel the special campaign and we won't relaunch it until after the first wave of Dawn of Madness backers receive their items. So that's very important, right? So in other words, you will have your Dawn of Madness wave 1 and then do that. And that's so much smarter. There is a real thing. It's called delivery hype, where you get the cool game and you open it up and it's so amazing. And if you follow that to 2 days later, finding out, oh my gosh, they're offering this cool Celestial campaign now, and you're still riding that delivery hype, you get so many more people that are just excited about your product. Because, if you wait too long, then you get kind of like, oh yeah, that game, yeah, it's old news now. The new hotness came out. But if that's the hotness, that's a real thing, and we all feel it. I mean, part of the experience of getting these Kickstarters is getting that big shipment in. You guys know it, the 56 pounds kind of junk, right? Huge boxes, so much stuff. You're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's part of the thing you're buying in. That's part of the product, in my opinion. And part of the price, the premium price with all the shipping and stuff, is getting that. It's so much different than a retail game. It's actually very cool. So anyway, that's good to hear. So that puts us a few months away from Celestial's relaunch. Now that's where I kind of have some issue with, right? So it's in pre-production now. They don't have the last storybook. Once that's there, then they can go full production. They have the miniatures, but still have to do that. Either way, I expect probably at least 2 months of production by the time they finish. I don't think they're going to be that quick on the ball when it comes to not only finalizing the storybook, delivering it to them, making sure there's no revisions that are needed, and then actually printing all that and putting it together, picking and packing and shipping out. And then you have the slow trek across the ocean, then to the distribution hubs, and then finally to people. I think it's going to be more than a few months. A few I read as 3 to 4, and I think it's going to be at least 5 to 6. In my opinion. Either way, less than a year away is what it sounds like. All the Celestial models have already been handed over to the factory, so it won't necessarily draw delivery dates when we relaunch the campaign. Likely you will still receive the miniatures in October next year. That's going to be huge for the Celestial campaign. Again, benefits from waiting. They're going to make so much more money. Delivery hype, great. Lead up with prototypes, some of that, great. Again, you would think this would be obvious, right? But not everybody's great at campaigns too. I want to say that right now. Not everybody really is great at this. So yeah, that's awesome. And then of course, being able to be like, guys, if you back now, within months, it's going to deliver like an STL campaign, like a 3D print campaign where you get it almost right afterwards. Like, okay, then we're going to ship off your miniatures because we're all ready for it. Like, that's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be pretty cool. Finally, from all of us at Dimension Games, we want to thank you again. We take our backers' trust very seriously. Sometimes often we stumble, but hopefully more often than not, we get back up again. We will not let backers down. This last part here where, you stumble and get back up again. I think that's important. I have said many times on this channel, for years actually, that it's not necessarily that you have to be perfect online, right? No company has to be perfect. They will all make mistakes, right? That's okay. What's important is how you react to it once that mistake is called out to you. It's something I even haven't done perfectly. I've tried to improve over time. I hope you've appreciated that, of course. But, sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes maybe you make the same mistake a couple times even. Like, it does happen. Now, when it comes to somebody asking for your money, that's a little bit different, of course. But either way, I judge based off of your reaction, not what necessarily happened. So definitely a mistake to launch this. Definitely their mindset was wrong. Their opinions were wrong. Their decisions were wrong. But it does look like they are correcting it. And it does look like, as far as I can tell, they're cool with waiting. It's not a financial thing, which is very good to see and hear. And they have delivered, again, Deep Madness twice, because they had the big box expansion afterwards. They had those big boxes. And then they also did Twisted Fables twice. And the two other things are in pre-production. So things seem to be okay, which is good. I'm glad to see that. One final thing, and I'll let you guys go, but it's a good talking point. If I scroll down here to one more comment, John here says, "Am I angry? Yup. I wasn't until I started typing and realized how you just ignored us from years now. I'm in my 70s now. I may never see the game I backed." This has actually happened through COVID, right? Especially through COVID, but through these long campaigns like Kingdom Monster and stuff, where there are people who back these games and then they literally die for a variety of reasons. And then their loved ones either keep getting games because of the delay, or again, they were just never able to enjoy what they bought. It's important to keep the humanity in all this, right? That these are real people that are in all kinds of different situations. Maybe this was their one big splurge and they really wanted this game. It doesn't matter the reasons. Just know that there's a person that backed this game, and that person wants to play that game. And you haven't delivered to that person, not that backer, that person. I think it's important to kind of remember that. And that's why you shouldn't lose sight of it. For people like John, for people like you, for people like me, for everybody. The response to this, though, is also worth talking about. Byron says, "It honestly guts me to hear you feel that way." First of all, it's a great sentiment. "I've always considered you and Russ friends, and I still do." Now, this is a hard part. And I know Alex from Board Game Host has spoken about this. And I don't know if I ever have or not. When you work with someone, in any capacity, when you get to know people in some way, shape, or form, right? You message the dev and then, you're like, "Oh, hey, you ready for the meeting?" Like, "Oh, yeah, sorry, my kid was acting up." And so then you wait or whatever and you meet up with them because you're trying to do a playthrough or something like that. And then you ask, "Oh, yeah, how's your kid?" Like, "Oh, yeah, he's fine." And they're like, "How old is he?" "Oh, he's fine." And now suddenly he has a 4-year-old son. And it just naturally happens when you work next to somebody. I'm sure you can think of coworkers that you've used that you've worked with, that you get to know, right? You do become attached to people. And when it's a passion like this and you share something like board games together and you play board games with them and stuff, it's very easy to establish some sort of friendliness. I'll say friendliness versus friendship, because I think that's kind of an important distinction. At the end of the day, I have a job to do. The developers have a job to do. Right. And that separation will always be there. And I think true friendship, you can't have a separation like that. You can't have things that pull you one way or another because you have other responsibilities that might be against the other person. And I don't mean against it in a certain way. I just mean I think friends sacrifice for one another, right? I will sacrifice my Saturday afternoon and let you borrow my truck and help you move. Or whatever, right? Like that's what you do. I'll float you $20, right? That's friendship. And that can't happen. Byron can't go and give Russ special treatment, or at least probably shouldn't, over other backers, unless Russ is actually providing stuff, or John or anybody like that, right? Like you have these distinctions there, but you do become friendly, and it does make it hard. It makes it hard. Guts, Byron. When you have to do something like this, when you have to call a company out that you might like, or when you have to give somebody bad news that you actually would be friends with in any other circumstance, it makes it hard. It makes it really suck. It's why a lot of YouTubers, I'm not going to name any names, but a lot of YouTubers just avoid it completely. And I can't blame them. It sucks. I've had to do it before. And it's not fun to do. It makes you feel kind of rotten. And you're doing the right thing, but it doesn't mean you enjoy it. Hopefully that makes sense. So you just got to be careful about that. And then John here says, I have no hard feelings toward Dimension games. Sometimes folks get frustrated, especially crotchety old geezers. That's the point I'm going to end on. everybody has bad days. Sometimes they launch campaigns with no explanation. Sometimes they make angry comments that are probably a little too strong than maybe they should be. I'm not saying he did it. I'm just saying like people have bad days. It's why I tend not to do any like bans, even when people break rules in my own Discord, because sometimes maybe you're frustrated. You know, maybe there's something going on with your life or whatever, but one bad day shouldn't like ruin your entire otherwise good experience, right? And so I guess, yeah, I'm just going to end it on that. Like, I get it. I get it. It sucks. So this was a wild ride, and it goes to show keep backers first. It also goes to show you guys how strong of an opinion you hold, how much weight you have for these. Granted, I think part of the problem was nobody knew this campaign was even a thing. For sure. But a large part of it was Dawn of Madness backers not putting up with this crap. And that's good to do. And it shows that you do have some control over that. That companies can't just keep going on, that you can follow them and you can do stuff like this. It's definitely possible. So anyway, yeah, that was a crazy story. I'm going to be following this up with a regular news video. There's a lot of cool campaigns out. This was a big, heavy subject, so I want to talk through this, but stay tuned for that, obviously. Behind me, the Witcher game that will be unboxed here, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you have not. A lot of you aren't subscribed. It does help. Thank you so much. If you appreciate this video, a like on the video does help. Guys, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye, guys.